the pipelines, and you can expand the sewer capacity and the water capacity and the water lines and bring the county roads out to county standards, et cetera, which you can't do, quite frankly, if you have 5s and 5 acres or 10s or 20-acre parcels. We can't, and then we're subsidizing all the services I talked about that we gain efficiencies by providing if people live within the community centers. So I look at this and I just don't see where this even comes close to meeting the purposes of of what I would consider to be a community plan area. And I look at some of these zonings, and in a community plan, it seems to me it would be residential, commercial, recreation, and some public service. I disagree with my friend Mike Delordo. I don't think industrial tends to have lots of conflicts with commercial and residential. I would like to have some industrial parks that in the new general plan that the county would designate as industrial, and not think that we are going to incorporate them in the community plan area. I don't believe that makes a lot of sense. I'll just talk briefly on Holly Mines' comment about democracy, and God, this is all ugly, and you've come here and now we have to deal with this sort of ugliness of the democratic process. But this is not pure democracy. Pure democracy would say this goes out to a vote of the people. I mean, this is going to be representative government, representative democracy, and it's going to be decided by 3 votes up here. And you can look around and say, well, geez, I have 120 comments, or I have 200 comments, et cetera. But there's probably 7,000 people in that district, and their particular representative is Gary, and they voted for him, and he's going to have a very significant input, in my opinion, into what gets adopted by the rest of us. I would just like to talk very briefly on just a policy issue, and I've spoken about this before, but I look at the process we just went through and I find it to be very inefficient, very inane, very wasteful. I think it makes no sense at all to have COG be involved in the project delivery of a project like this. I make arguments constantly before this board, and I sit on the COG board, so I make it before the COG board. I think the city or the county should be treated exactly as the City of Angels is treated, and the City of Angels does all project deliveries themselves. This COG should be a revenue source. That revenue for this grant should have been contracted with the county, and this community plan should have been done through the county planning department. I will say the same thing for the road projects. All the road projects that the COG obtains funding for should be done through the county public works department if it's in the unincorporated area of the county, and it always is done through the city if it's in the incorporated city of Angels Camp. I look at this and think of the gentleman here at the end of the front row saying that, geez, he thinks and I don't mean this negatively, but he thought this project had been short-circuited because they were supposed to have a final meeting, COG was supposed to have a final meeting with you before it came to the board. Well, the simple reality is the board is the decision-making body for this whole thing, and we haven't been involved in the process at all. This is the first study session we've had on the Valley Springs community plan. We have not in any way defined what the purpose of the community plan should be in Valley Springs, or should even be countywide. We haven't talked about what the boundaries should be. I mean, here are the maps. It comes to us now, and what, in my opinion, should happen next, because I'm not at all sort of happy with this process, and we're so far along in the process. I think what should happen now is COG should exit itself from this process, and it should be taken over by the county planning department, which in my opinion is where it should have been from day one. I mean, we have had so much controversy over this project, and yet the county has had almost no involvement in it. And we're the decision-making body. The COG board is not a decision-making body in this process, nor is it in the road projects. In the final analysis, it comes back to this board. And so from a policy perspective, I think the board needs to insist that the county be treated as the COG treats the city, and that the COG not be a project delivery entity, that the county is the project delivery entity for the unincorporated area, and the city, as it always has been, will be the project delivery entity for things within the incorporated area of Angels Camp. So my feeling at this point is it's time for COG to exit, it's time for it to go to the planning department, and if we don't have money or resources enough to complete this process, then I think we need to proceed with the general plan and come back and visit the Valley Springs community plan when we come back and visit the other community plans. And I was never a fan of including the community plans in the general plan update. Because I could see that this was going to happen. I think it'll happen in Copper also. And we need to get the general plan adopted so we have an updated, legally defensible general plan and come back and visit the community plans. But so those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mr.
I guess I would just add that if there is any money left in the grant, I think that money should get transferred to the planning department along with the responsibilities for the community plan at this point. So that completes my comments. I'm sorry.
Mr. Walensky.
I don't disagree with much of what Supervisor Tryon has said, but I have comments on some other matters, and there are two things I'd like to comment on relating to what just happened. It's important to note that the original grant and the arrangement that was supposed to occur was that the county was the lead agency in this. And the fact that we did not play that role has something to do with our own internal processes and failures. And I just think that's important for people to know, because COG sort of stepped into the void. Nature loves a vacuum, I don't know what it is, but whatever happened here was not the original intent, and the planning department was supposed to be the lead agency, with COG carrying out under their overall direction a public process, which was designed originally, and the whole grant was designed to maximize public input. Now, oddly enough, and in a way that nobody could have ever imagined, we've had more public input from the Valley Springs, and now apparently there are 4 of you, because it's not just Valley Springs. It apparently is things like La Contenta and Rancho and whatever else lurks in the hinterlands. So my thinking is that we got off track partly due to our own failings, and I think we need to admit that and not be just pointing fingers at the people who tried to pick up the ball, however difficult that was and however flawed some people feel that the product. Also, the second thing that I think is important here is that this board, commissioned a firm to take a look at our existing general plan, the community plans, and our zoning code, and advise us on what our status was. And what came back without calling in more litigation was something that said we had a few conflicts between the general plan, our zoning code, and the community plans, which had been updated at different times, some of them not for 30 years, 20-some at the time. What occurs in that is certain exposures. And the exposure is not just for this county getting sued, which happens a lot these days, but it also has something to do with whether property owners can do anything with their land with these as their underlying documents. And that's very important for both business and private landowners. And when we talk about property rights, part of what needs to happen is that we reconcile our documents, that we bring them up to legal standard, and that we make them consistent. So I don't have a problem with the planning concept itself. It's actually what human beings at their best have the capability of doing. Whether we're living up to our full potential is yet to be determined. But I do think that it's important to note that there's been a lot of people participating. And I think that's for one main reason. You love your area. You're here, you're passionate about it. Each of you came with your own dreams. And somehow together we have to be able to reconcile some differences and disparities between those dreams. But that's what government at its best does. And that's what the human condition sometimes fails. But let's go into a few aspects here. Valley Springs does matter. It matters not just the people in Valley Springs, but all of us who travel through it. It has the 3 best restaurants, one of which I hope we'll go to in some time this day. It is a commute lane. It is a traffic jam. It is it's a lot of things to a lot of people. The people who live right near it, some of them think they're in Valley Springs, and other people think they're very much not in Valley Springs. But you've made it pretty clear that there's that we continue to have an issue. I've heard of arguments about who's on first, but I've never really seen this extensive a development of what game are we in and what is and what's the playing field. And I find that to be a fundamental flaw in our process. You got to decide who you are and where you are before you start doing stuff about it. And I think we invited conflict by not having that resolved first. Mr. Delordo spoke on, it was one of 8 towns in District 2 that did process, but 2 of the key things there were that the first thing people got together on was, who are we and where are we? And they voted. We had a different idea of voting. Process in your area seems to be much more advanced, electronic in nature sometimes. I don't even know what those little clickers are, but we didn't use that. We did something very old-fashioned called town hall meetings, and people had their dust-ups, had their arguments, and ultimately decided on boundaries. We have yet to do that here, really. I mean, there's a new map. There's lots of other maps. There's alternatives, but that's a difficult thing to overcome. Secondly, I should say District 2 is as skeptical of government as any of the people in Valley Springs ever were or could be. In fact, for years we ran government out of town and felt good about it. But I have to say that the reason we did plans was to affect our own destiny. It was so that other people weren't imposing some will externally, or that this board, however wonderful it is, that people thought it would be better for them to decide within each town what their dreams and hopes were and try to put it together, not necessarily to resolve all differences, but to come to some common conclusions about what they could agree on. And I find that the process that has been tried here is a challenge. Maybe it's the place, but I see generational issues. Some people are very comfortable with electronics. You couldn't get that over in my district because there's a lot of seniors and there's a lot of people who don't even have computers. So it's a generational bias, and I know my kids would feel great about clickers and electronic voting. But there's other people who have different sensibilities, so I think that's another issue. I think we had maps, but what we tried to do in our district was, before we had final community meetings, we made sure that there were parcel map overlays on the entire thing so that people could look at their property and say, okay, I know where it is in relation to that. So the ambiguities of these things are tough. Finally, one other process issue, which I think is critical, is the idea, and I heard it from COG, but I disagree with it in this particular case. Much as I respect the effort, the technical work, and all the heroics that went into this, I just think that when you say you can't disallow people from a public process, that's true in our meetings. And as you can see, we've allowed everything that moves. But in a meeting that's deciding future land use for a particular area, generally speaking, the franchise rests within the people who are affected. And I can't imagine a more conflict-inviting moment than to have that issue of the franchise not just the way we vote, but who has the franchise, is very essential to making a decision that people feel is valid. And we have yet to get that resolved, even as it comes to us at this late date. And by the way, this is the last date. This is the drop-dead date. So what to do about it is problematic given some of the processes. We have two issues that Valley Springs ought to be real historically aware of. And I'm surprised it hasn't really come up much here as we've gotten into discussions about fundamental, Federalist papers, anti-Federalist positions. We've gotten pretty historic here. But there are two more recent pieces of history that Valley Springs ought to be aware of. You've lived it. One is the question of, does lack of planning affect property rights negatively? And the other is, does bad planning affect property and taxpayer rights negatively? And I'll tell you the answer to my way of thinking is both, and you are the poster child for this. What about taxpayers' rights? When you say you can build in a floodplain and you can build impervious surfaces around a floodplain, and it's a 200-year floodplain, and it floods in 5 of the next 10 years. When taxpayers are asked to pay $5 to $10 million to fix the problem that had to do with lack of planning or the exertion of property rights that actually caused public harm in the end, the exercise of which wound up with millions of dollars of liabilities for taxpayers, it's not just so fundamental as to say it's a property right or a taxpayer right. These two rights actually come into some level of conflict. And good planning and moving out of a lack of planning would have helped us avoid such a conflict and moment where our fundamental philosophical positions and political positions come into direct conflict without hope of resolution. Too late for Cosgrove Creek. A bunch of us are going to Washington to beg for some relief so that you taxpayers and citizens and property owners in Valley Springs don't wind up having your entire investment completely ruined in the flood that is inevitable. And the dam came, what, a quarter inch or an inch or two from bursting and knocking out not just Valley Springs, but a whole lot of people who don't think anymore that they're Valley Springs, but are affected by decisions that are land use decisions that are made in Valley Springs. So I'm impressed with the strength of ideology and position. But there is a practical on-the-ground reality that we as a board are responsible for. Some of it has to do with public safety. Some of it has to do with taxpayer rights. Some of it has to do with property rights. A lot of it has to do with constitutional rights and how we exercise them. There are many different rights that come into play here, but how we exercise it together has something to do with our sense of community, sense of place, and our respect for one another. And I fear that in whatever process we engaged in, and however we invited some of these conflicts by flaws in our own activity and process, that we've ultimately done just some dissemblage of that sense of community. Not that you haven't helped along, in some ways yourselves. That people have found their differences in a process that I thought was to be able to explore and give people a venue to find what they have in common and move forward on that basis. Now, Supervisor Tryon has called out the need to have a purpose for a community plan. And I believe that's true. I wholeheartedly agree. If you don't have a purpose, how are you going to get where you're trying to go? Or at least a destination. But I'd like to add what we thought our purpose was in District 2, because we had 8 communities, only one of which had a somewhat outdated community plan. So we had 7 that were starting from scratch, and we had one that Mr. Delorto just described. And what we thought it was an opportunity for the people of each town to take some look at themselves, say what they thought of what their values were, how they wanted to move forward together, and what kind of a plan, what kind of future land use they could think of together that they could find some common ground on. So while my idea of a community plan is much closer to Supervisor Tryon's, that is, we need to have some consistency about infrastructure and densities that reflect our capacity to provide it. We have to take a look at impacts on schools, on water, on roads, on sewer. And by the way, I really appreciated the person talking about septics and how we have lots of technology now. But let me tell you what we have in a good part of this county. For those of you who don't live over a watershed, what we have is fractured rock. What we have is a situation that nobody should be putting their leach lines through and getting their wells dug into at the same time, and certainly not in high densities, because that's a public safety issue, folks, and it's got failing wells in my district all over the place. So when we talk about planning, it's not just about a specific right or not a right. It has to do with what ground we live on. What is capacity to what can it handle? How can we do things economically in some kind of viable way so that we don't create communities that are unlivable and so fraught with conflict that they disintegrate and get us away from the value of rural life that we have all come here to appreciate? Maybe in different ways. All 7 towns that were doing new stuff came up with something different in my district, some of which I disagree with, some of which I think is outstanding and innovative, but all of which I support because the process was legit and the people said, this is what we want to have happen. Now, what do we do with this? It's an interesting pass. On the one hand, we can say, we'll take no action and we will default. We have already heard, and I believe this to be true, that the default position is already going to be part of our future process. So that's already in place. What is will be studied under one of the options being considered in the environmental impact report that has to be done studying our various options. One of the options is the default option for Valley Springs. So the question here today for me is really, and I believe in democratic process, and I know you all elected a supervisor, so I'm not going to state a position until I actually hear from the guy. But what I would say on the question of this pass is that if we want any further consideration of anything other than default, which, by the way, defaults, remember I said we had a firm that advised us that we were in some arrears as to reconciling our general plan, our zoning code, and our community plans. Well, guess what? The default position takes us back to the point where most people who want to do something with their land may find themselves with such documentary conflict that they can't do what property rights people are advocating. Do people get this? To me, it's so important that that piece of it be part of our review and consideration. Government should not be inviting you to these conflicts. Government should not be inviting towns to fight about things that are the result of mistakes, omissions, or failure to reconcile that government's responsibility is. At our best, we listen to you carefully. We try to reflect those things in our documents, and we try to make sure our documents are sound, legal, and consistent. So I'm very much looking forward to what Gary's advice would be, whether we should include some other option and continue to study, work, and process, or whether we should simply shut the door and say, all right, you missed the boat, Valley Springs, and you're going to have either a default option, which will then have to be reconciled by our departments and legal people to try to figure out what to write for you so that we don't wind up in the situation that I just described of paralyzed and unable to move. Good luck, Gary. I don't envy you. I'm grateful to represent District 2 at this moment.
Russ?
Okay. You mentioned you wanted to go to lunch. Didn't sound like it, Steve.
Well, I'm indefatigable. It's like the Energizer Bunny or something.
All right. I just have a little technical question from a standpoint of trying. Certainly, I'll try. This map that you're proposing, it has a kind of a glaring question in it as it relates to the area of white that touches Highway 26 north of Vista del Lago, going up to about where we were talking about earlier, about the all that white area there. You've got Would you talk to the property owners in here to find out whether they have any desire to be included in this? The reason I'm asking is that from a land use planning or a community planning standpoint, it's very illogical. We have a stated purpose that we want to take advantage of our infrastructure growth and those types of things that are on down the way, that we wouldn't have some color in this area. It's really pretty ridiculous in my mind. And the other specific thing is that we have right here, this white area, there's a commercial business or an automobile harvesting place that is in the white area, disenfranchised by that map. So I'm not asking for an answer to the question right now, but please obtain that. Okay. Early on, we heard people talking about that there must be some kind of a hidden agenda here. We heard references to Agenda 21 and all that kind of stuff. I swear, is there a Bible around here? I never heard about Agenda 21 prior to about, 120 days ago. I didn't know I was sucked into it and a participant in it. And Alice, you can open your mouth and make all kinds of gestures and everything, but when you mentioned Agenda 21 as if I was a card-carrying member of that society, and I'd never heard of it before.
Okay.
So anyway, all right. This used to be part of District 5. Now it's under Gary's watchful eyes. I'm ready to help Gary in any way that you want my assistance. I don't find any flaw with the methodology. I mean, what I have seen is a lot of folks try their best to comply with the wants and wishes of the community, and every time somebody has said, well, wait a minute, why don't you try to do it this way, there's been an eagerness and a willingness to do it in the way that has been requested most recently. I think it's one thing that occurred to me when some members of the myvalleysprings.com folks came to the microphone today. 4 or 5 years ago, when you first formed, there was an overwhelming conviction among those of us who were observing what was going on is that you folks were just strictly no-growthers. You didn't want anything to happen here, and I think it's very paradoxical that you're here, pleading, let's expand this boundary of this map beyond the 74 boundaries, because it's reasonable and prudent and logical, and we all here are faced with a mandate from the state that we're charged with the responsibility of making decisions that will allow growth, will allow it to happen in a way that is not detrimental to the folks that are affected by it. So I'm not in any way a supporter of the philosophy of let's stick with the 1974 boundary, because to me it is not logical at all. This whole process is meant to expand the horizon, look out 25 or 30 years, make sure that we don't paint ourselves into a corner as best we can, with the knowledge that we may stub our toe along the way, but this is it's a process that's warranted, needed, necessary, and I'm proud to be a part of it. So we do, of course, have this drop-dead date that we can't go beyond, and I think that there are dire economic consequences for this community plan if we do go beyond it. I am not convinced that I would agree with Supervisor Walensky that it was always intended from the very start that the planning department was going to be the lead agent on this. I was not aware of that, and we've certainly had our challenges with staffing and everything in that department, but we've been proceeding along here as best we could under the circumstances. So my hat's off to you guys. I'm very much inclined to support this this particular map with repeating again and again and again that this doesn't represent the be-all and end-all. We've got recognized flaws. Mr. Randall, you and I have talked on, I think, 3 different occasions, and I've promised to you that I won't let you be adversely affected by any downzoning here. I know that phrase about "trust me, I'm from the government" is overused, but please recognize that I do have some sensitivity and background in this. I won't let this hurt you. Okay? That's all I want to say right now.
Okay.
That's awful big words.
Well, in the interest of moving this process along, as Mr. Thomas said, we're here today because the general plan needs to move along. And either Valley Springs is in or it's out. And it's either in a newer iteration, did I pronounce that right? Or it's as it was in 1974. And I think the vision of Valley Springs is what all of you are trying to define. I also want to what Steve said about the county being part of this process. The county signed on as a partner on the grant application. The fact that the county did not become part of it happening is the county's fault. It is not the Council of Governments' fault. So I think Mr. Tryon needs to be reminded of that. So it's not that maybe it shouldn't go back to the county now, but we're the ones that fell down on the job at the very beginning of the process. And I thank Mr. Somerset and Mr. McSorley for proceeding with what should have been a joint partnership. Having been through 2 community plans in the Ebbets Pass area that have taken 7 years, I'm really quite proud of Valley Springs for moving this far in this short period of time. Land use is an emotionally charged issue. You are trying to set your destiny, as been mentioned, for the next 20, 25 years. How is it going to dovetail with the general plan? The community plan is more stringent than the general plan. And the Ebbets Pass area, we started putting in mixed-use zoning where we never had it before. We dealt with parking, which is an issue in Ebbets Pass. I'm not sure that it is in the Valley Springs. I always seem to find a parking place there. We dealt with parks. We dealt with circulation. We dealt with how residential and commercial are going to marry within what our community is for the Arnold Plan and the Avery Hathaway Pines Plan. So that's your challenge. And the focus has to be, to not repeat what my colleagues have said, that's your vision. And it's not who led the charge or who responded and where they lived. It's what is your vision and what is it that you want to have Supervisor Tuffanelli bring forward on your behalf. The purpose of the general plan is to plan the growth within your specific community. And I do business in Valley Springs. I drive through Valley Springs. I've been waiting for a stoplight or a roundabout at the 4-way intersection, and now we want to talk about something controversial. We can get off on that topic. So growth and how you want to live as a community is emotional, and it is controversial. And I'll probably go with the direction that Supervisor Tuffanelli does, maybe. Got to hold that caveat out. But, we're all partners in this. He represents you as a district supervisor, but all of us vote on your community, and all of us really care about what happens to Jeannie's project or what happens at that intersection, because in the end, we're all of us are in that. And I am excited to see you very engaged. Maybe we should get darts, but, it's very exciting to see this happen. And in my community, we had a committee, and the committee made the decisions, put the options together, and went out to the community. Now, that might have worked at that point in time. Guaranteed that would not work today in Arnold or Avery Hathaway Pines. Having been involved with Valley Springs and its growth ever since I've lived here in a different capacity than what I have now, I don't think you want to go back to what you have as your vision in 1974. I don't know that that's working for you. I don't know that that's working for the county of Calaveras. It's, where do you see yourselves in 20 years? And I guess I'll turn it over to Mr. Tuffanelli, because I'm interested in where he wants to take you, with maybe my support.
Jeez. Thank you, Madam Chair, for your wisdom. Thank all supervisors here today for their wisdom in getting to this point. Thank everybody for showing up. Mr. McSorley and Mr. Somerset, thank you for your presentation. I got to say, I've lived in the Valley Springs area in the Burson for close to 20 years. And for most of those years, it seemed that it was a laid-back community. Didn't hear much about things. People lived their lives. I've been supervisor for the last 17 months it has been, and it seems like it's been one controversy after another that I go through, this being one. And I brought this on the agenda today because back on the 20th we had this date earmarked for some type of presentation by the COG before the community plan that they were working on. And I wanted an opportunity for everybody that wanted to voice their opinion at that time to be able to do so. It seems like all the other community plans, when they were brought here, it was given to the board during public comment period, and there was very little fanfare for each one of those as I look back on it. But this, since its inception and beginning about 17 months ago, 18 months ago, with the stakeholder meetings, it's been a very, very, very controversial road that we followed to get here today. And when I was putting my thoughts together over the course of the weekend on what I was going to speak of today, I couldn't get a couple things out of my mind. And was I going to be wearing a target on both sides of me today? Was this a loaded gun with a clip in it that had maybe 500 bullets and a hairpin trigger that people were going to sit here and fire shots if I didn't go with what they wanted me to go with? In this particular instance, there's 3 or 4 or 5 different ways that people are asking to go. And I'm very encouraged and very proud that we have the community in Valley Springs what it is, and that people are very involved and willing to step forward and give their opinion on any matter. I think that shows to the community itself. I think part of the problems that we have down in this area, because of the way the past it's been allowed to grow, we have what we call Valley Springs, but we have integral parts that people consider themselves a separate community. You have La Contenta considers herself La Contenta. You have Rancho that considers herself Rancho. You have the concentrated town center of Valley Springs that calls herself Valley Springs. You have the Burson area that actually can be included, and when you talk, I myself, when I meet people, I say I'm from Valley Springs area. So I think that people are, in my opinion, willing to say that they are part of that community of Valley Springs, but they want to hold on and to keep their section separate, defined separately. And I don't find fault in that. I understand how people feel. I feel the same way with Burson. Even though I feel part of the community of Valley Springs. So that being said, where do we go from here? How do I feel we should proceed? We have before us an entity that was not commissioned by this board to go out and seek a grant to put together a community plan. That was done by another board and another private enterprise that collaborated on it, and although the county was part of it, they were a sub-recipient. And that's what I've read in this grant. However, the county was expected to be part of the process, and for whatever reasons, I think it started out that way, but for whatever reasons, it ended up not being fully engulfed in it, although I think they've tried to lately here be involved in it, and some of their suggestions fell on deaf ears and some of them didn't. I think that what we have during the process came up with is it flawed? Well, yes, I think it's flawed, but I think if it was the scope of work was to count the number of ticks in a specific area, someone would come up and say it was flawed. I think the groups that are involved in it will agree that yes, it wasn't a perfect process. It does have flaws in it. There was $255,000 worth of taxpayers' money spent on this. Shall we just wad it up and throw it away? Or shall we try and salvage some of it that we can scope into everybody's vision? Is that possible? I'm not sure it's possible. I don't think we can please everybody, but maybe we can have everybody compromise on some of it. I think we probably all agree that we need some form of plan to go forward, whether it's minuscule or grand like this is, to give us some control as a community as we grow. I think both Supervisors Walensky and Tryon brought up the fact if you don't, then it's going to be the way it's been going and allowed to do whatever, however. There's no plan down there, so if a developer wants to come in and spend millions of dollars and buy ag property and put up shop and start developing it, then there's no plan saying that he can't. So I think we should try and salvage some of this plan. How are we going to go about doing that? Well, I think the first part of the process, in my opinion today, is to at least accept the map that's given to us. I do have another question, though, of people in the audience. Is there anybody else here that has put together a different map that would like to bring it forward and give it to the board today? I've asked several people during this process. Ron, you have your hand up.
Yes, you asked if there was a different map that anybody had. This Gordon survey has a map that was presented by the Calaveras Council of Governments as option E. And on that option, there was 200, and I believe the figure was 212 people from the people that live in the town of Valley Springs who wanted option E. There was 5 people who wanted option B. So, yes, there has been a plan presented to you.
Okay.
And I think that that's the people within the community that that's what they want. Now, I just heard you say that you feel that you're a person and that you feel like you're part of the town of Valley Springs. And you feel like
I feel like I'm part of the community of Valley Springs.
Right. So if you would like to take some of this smart growth that's downtown, where there's 20 houses per acre, maybe low-cost housing, and put that in your community down there, you wouldn't have so much opposition from the community of Valley Springs.
And Ron, it's been submitted. I have the map, and I think part of the process that we need to get to, like I was saying earlier, is take that map, take this map, and maybe sculpt it into something that is acceptable to the majority of the people. We have to accept this map, in my opinion, just like we accepted the map that was presented to us at public comment period by Gene. I think my opinion is that it needs to go, and I will submit both of these maps to the planning department. I would like to see their comments on it. I'm also in favor of asking COG to walk away from it and let the county take over the process from here on out. I would also like to meet with planning, go over the ideas that were given today, here today, and in the past, take the map and the survey that was given, this COG map, see if we can't craft something out of it, and then I will hold myself some town hall meetings with the map that's crafted out of this and getting their opinion on it.
George, how's it going?
Okay, George, is there, do you have any objections to that, time-wise or staff-wise, or?
Not objections. We're here to take your direction, obviously, and I'll accept that and move on. I do have concerns about the timing and the resources related to the general plan update and the impact that this decision is going to have on the timeline and on our resources. To be perfectly honest, we don't have any additional money in our consultant's contract to work on this community plan. And depending on how much work is really involved from this point onward, I'm not sure how many staff resources we have to work on this as well. I don't know if there's any additional resources from the COG that could be brought to bear on this, and maybe that's not desirable, I'm not really sure. But I think it may not be likely, but it's possible that if we continue along this line that I think you're going in, that there could be delays in the general plan process, and it could incur more costs. Costs that we have not scoped into the contract or into our own work program as we speak.
How much money is left on the Caltrans grant that has not been expended at this point or committed?
I don't know the exact number, but we're pretty close to that being a budget. If I may make one other comment, just real briefly about the difference between the two maps, the map E that was referenced. This map represents land use designations within the boundary. The map E that you have is only boundaries, so it doesn't have the land use designations and the issues that you directed us to bring forward. So I would reiterate what Mr. White says, but a little bit different vein, if you will, that there would be some problematic process issues that would go along with that. I'm not suggesting a particular direction, just for information.
Well, George, I have a couple questions for you. At the April 20th meeting, we brought up the fact that the other community plans, you would be meeting with community leaders to go over those and scope those. If we accept the map today, why would that not fall within that purview?
Well, the way I see this map is not being a finished product, for one thing. It appears that there's a refinement process that's going to take place here, either through county staff or the COG or both. Not sure how long that's going to take. The situation with the other community plans are we have fully realized plans. They have been submitted, and really all we're going to do is to go back and confirm with those communities that our maps are correct for the purpose of putting those maps in the model and moving forward. And we expect to finish that within the next 30 days. So I don't know if this falls in, into that same time frame. My sense is probably not.
So we're not, George, we're not doing these other community plans? We're just going to accept them as given to us with no analysis whatsoever?
Well, no, not exactly, but we've had a lot of conversations with these communities already. And these plans, for the most part, were submitted almost a year ago. So we've been able to go through that refinement process already, but we are going to go back to them one last time and confirm what's in there, is accurate, is acceptable, and there's not any other areas of controversy that we don't know about. I think we've pretty much dealt with most of those. In the case of Valley Springs, we're in many respects starting more from the beginning than the end, and I think that's my concern. And that's a nebulous unknown for me. I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't know if we have the resources to get there.
Can you give us some sense of the, you're worried about potential delay, you've seen the lay of the land, you see the product. Can you give us some sense of how much time and perhaps cost would accrue to do this, to complete it, and in time to be within our general plan process, and how long will the process be delayed as a result?
I mean, standing here today, I probably couldn't do that, but I could come back to you with that if you're pointing us in this direction. But my sense is it's going to take longer than 30 days to refine this map for the purpose of having a map that we can use for the model. That is the next step in this process. But I couldn't pick a date. I mean, I just couldn't do it standing here today.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Thank you, George.
Mr. Tuffanelli.
Well, that being said, where do we go from here?
You have if there were questions. Ron asked a question. I have a question for Steve. Oh, man.
It wasn't a question. It's do you have a map?
I just, for clarification, I think that these grants or the disbursement of the funds are pretty specific. I just want to make certain that we're not suggesting that if there's a few $1,000s left in that grant that the county could be the recipient of that to pay. I mean, I just, can you address that?
I think that possibility exists, but we also do have contracts that have encumbered a significant portion. We can go back and take a look, but again, I'm going to guesstimate that not much is remaining.
Okay.
I wanted a question of George. Mr. White, at this date, you were expecting COG to come forward with a complete plan?
Not a complete plan, but with at least what I thought would be a fairly final map, a land use and plan that we could use for the purpose of the next step, which is to take all these maps and put them into the U-Plan model. That's really what we're looking for. I mean, I think we know there's an accompanying policy document that typically goes with these community plans. It talks, in a different sense about what's expected, for the next 25 years to 20 years in the community. That's something that I think can be worked on in this interim period. But the map is really essential for our next steps. And that's why we're going out to the communities to confirm what we have is accurate and hopefully move on from there.
Can I jump in here with a thought? We've been saying all day that this map is a kind of a snapshot of the realities that we knew this morning, with the expectation that their thoughts could be added to it, it could be bumped out, other boundaries could be extended. What's the, just for the sake of trying an idea, what if we were to approve this map subject to revisions within the next 30 days or so, and we just have their consultants talk to the individual landowners that have expressed their concerns today? I don't know that there are landowners that go beyond the ones that we heard today, and we could have like as Gary suggested, have a public meeting down there to say, okay, let's take one last look at this, and then 30 days from now, you would have the final iteration of this map. I want to emphasize it won't be a changed map other than just another iteration of it.
I understand. I mean, if we could get a more refined map in 30 days that would work for the purpose, I would be very happy with that. I just have my doubts given what we've experienced so far, that's all.
Well, if we go down that road and we don't have one in 30 days, and we accept this map now, where does that put us?
We're looking at you, I think, on that one.
And I'm asking rhetorically to myself, I'm not,
I think what it really means...
You can accept it in the sense that it's given to us. You don't have to accept it in the sense of adopting it. I mean, send it to George, let George take a look.
Well, nothing's going to be adopted here.
Come back in a week and give us an assessment.
Well, I don't disagree with that, but I'm looking at spending resources, something in 30 days we may not have.
Point of clarification. If I may, you're accepting this report, you're not accepting the zoning changes. Correct?
That's correct.
You're accepting, if you vote to accept it, you would be accepting a report, and a report only. You're not accepting land use changes at this time.
At this time.
Well, I'm not sure I want to accept the boundaries at this time either.
Well, I agree with you. I would commit to help work to revise it, because I think that there are many existing land use changes that people still are just unclear on. They think there's a change when there isn't. And the boundary, I don't think there should be agricultural property in the community center.
I totally agree.
Lock antenna is unchanged. It's a big yellow part of this, but the reality is lock antenna is unchanged. It's just like, where Rancho want to be. I mean, they're just, so I mean,
Yes, but to me, it still needs to be looked at in terms of, this is where we want growth to go. This is where we're hoping growth will go. This is where we would like to direct growth to go. How are we going to provide services to whatever maps adopted?
And people see the yellow designation and they think something's changed. I say to you, nothing's changed.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, in my opinion, I don't know why we have RR in here, RA. I don't know why you would have ag. I mean, take an example of Angels Camp. They just did theirs. Our home ranch is about 750 to 800 acres, 60 acres of which is already within the city limits of Angels Camp. They took the remainder, put it in the sphere of influence, and they put and I told them there's no way you're going to do that and leave it with an ag